Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Perspective Philosophy, where we try to better our perceptions of the world through philosophical discussion. I hope you're all having a lovely night tonight. So, tonight I'm going to be responding to Lena Norms. I recently found Lena Norms because she made a video in response to she's not vegan. Well, why she's not vegan, full stop. The video was actually not too bad in some respects. It seems that she's aware that there is a responsibility there, that she did make some mistakes about veganism and about ethics that I think is worth bringing to their attention and to your attention so that we can avoid making it. If you don't know who I am, hello, my name is Lewis. I'm on the channel Perspective Philosophy, and I'm a philosophy postgraduate, and I'm currently trying to get back to studying my PhD, Reading on animal information and animal ethics. So, the video that I'm responding to is this: why I'm not a vegan. So, we're just going to get straight into it, and hopefully it'll go quite well.
Okay, we need to talk about something, but first, we need to go and get some food. Right, I'm here to admit that I was wrong.
Ai început să studiezi cu playlist lo-fi, dar acum chiar trebuie să te concentrezi.
So, I think she might have bought that burger thinking it was vegan. Lena, that's actually not a vegan burger. It's not like, it's quite an easy mistake to make because it's been labeled plant-based, but they did test the Impossible Whopper on animals. Like, they tested the Impossible Burger on animals. So vegans actually actively avoid the Impossible Burger and buy things like Beyond Meat, which is really very, very similar, just a different company. We do it just because obviously we're against animal testing in all forms, and we don't want to support any industry which is going to engage in animal testing, and we can't trust that that company won't do it again. Another thing is that there is a vegan option at Burger King. So if you look next to the Impossible Whopper, there was also the Vegan Royale. That's labeled Vegan Royale because the Impossible Whopper is actually not vegan. Really, I hate to have to do this because it's actually Burger King who's put me in this position, but they're the ones that endorse a non-vegan product but put it forward as plant-based. It's an easy mistake to make.
And God knows nobody can do that on an empty stomach. Hello, and welcome to the mukbang. So I've always known that meat probably wasn't the best for the planet. I think sometimes we all like to pretend that this is new information. But I've known for a while, and
It's also really bad for animals, and that's really the focus of veganism. It's an animal rights movement. So it's like, if I was to ask you, why do we care about the environment? What would your answer be? Do we care about the environment for its own sake? The beauty of the rivers and the wonder of the trees, or we're going down some sort of aesthetic route? Or is it because these are the homes of animals? These are habitats for animals, including ourselves and including humans who share this world with non-human animals. Global warming is going to hit humans just as hard as it will hit many animals. So we do it for humans, but we do it for animals as well. We care about what I say we do. We engage in environmental activism, and we care about the environment because of animals. So just keep that in mind. The only reason the environment is even important is because somebody lives in it. If no one lived there, it wouldn't matter. I mean, you're not trying to conserve the environment of Mars. You're not trying to stop the degradation of the beauty of Neptune or something. It doesn't matter because nothing lives there. So when we think about why something is valuable, why we care about the environment. Remember, it's in relation to sentient beings. That's what veganism is fundamentally about.
I had a lot of hesitations that were thoroughly unresearched. Like, I made a big effort not to research those things, and probably made a few of my vegetarian and vegan friends feel quite awkward in the process. But cutting down on my meat consumption was on my 40 before 40 list. If you want to watch that, it's up here. And at the beginning of 2020, I gave up eating meat. Thank you. Thank you. Having
That's a solid start. I will say.
read all the literature I have though, I am not yet vegan. This isn't clickbait. I will tell you at the end of the video the reasons why I'm not vegan. But it's been almost 2 years now of not eating dead animals directly. And I've learned a lot. One being, I do actually understand, to some extent, why the early vegans had a reputation for being a little bit snarky, a little bit short-tempered, and maybe coming across a little bit tense. Because I realised what a complicated and nuanced topic it is, and how short of a window the world gives you to explain that in a conversation and a moment.
Yeah, I think it's really quite easy. Eating animals is wrong. It's something that animals stop eating pleasure to justify. It's normally the way that I think of religion. It is quite abrupt, and I think even confrontational. But I don't even see how we can change hearts and minds without changing, without getting people out of their comfort zones. And I think that it's unfortunate to say, but you've got to have gall and gumption to be a vegan. You've got to be willing to be disliked at times. Not everyone is going to like you. They're actually going to see, wait a minute, you're trying to change my way of life. You're attacking me. Well, that's not what you're doing. You're saying like this is wrong. We all need to change. And I think that's where the problem is coming from here. I think you see it as a very socially difficult transition, which it can be, but it doesn't have to be. I think that a lot of the time it's almost like pre-wedding jitters or something. It's like the commitment is in and of itself terrifying, but when you actually do it, it's like, oh wait a minute, this isn't so bad.
There's a culture of being like, so why are you vegan? And it's goddamn not possible to explain the meat industry and the systemic lies.
You don't need to explain any of the meat industry or the systemic lies. You just have to ask if it's okay to kill someone for food. Like, is it okay to kill another individual for pleasure? And I think most people will say no, and that's why I'm vegan.
In 30 to 40 seconds. So I do understand some of the animosity, and also this video isn't here to persuade you. I have not got all of the information, and I just wanted to share how I have been feeling about giving up meat and whether I am progressing to a vegan diet, because I know that the new year is coming up and it's something that people might be thinking about. So I'm just going to share my thoughts, my feelings, my experiences, and we're going to have a chat and maybe not wreck this hotel bed. Maybe. Now this isn't a video to persuade you in any way. This is a video for me to share all of the reasons why I wasn't vegetarian or vegan before, and why I now find those incredibly unconvincing past me. First reason was, I didn't know any vegans, but I felt like I wouldn't like them if I met them. Now this is talking like 19-year-old me probably, but it's true. I think when you don't know anyone and it's not within your realms of observable habits, it's a weird thing, and it's one of those hard things to talk about because it's not a personal choice.
Well, I think that's actually a really good point. I think that when you don't know any vegans and you don't know what it means to live a vegan lifestyle because you can't observe anyone else doing it, it becomes almost an abyss. Like, oh my God, how am I going to live? How am I going to shop? How am I going to function in society? There's no norms and conventions to guide me. And it's a very arduous process, I would say, where you realise that you've got to change your whole way of life. Now, that's where I would say I started feeling like that way when I initially going to go vegan. But then that was 6 years ago. And things have changed a lot since then. Things have become more accessible, don't get me wrong. But what made the biggest difference was the vegan community. Having a vegan community to turn to and look at other people's lives. Oh, wait a minute, what do you eat? What recipes do you use? Showed us a form of life. A way of living from which I could understand and adapt to my own standards. So if I wanted to eat, let's say, a high protein meal, I can see someone eating a high protein meal, and I'm like, oh right, well I'm gonna veganize that, or and I look to other communities and bring it into the vegan community. Or I look to, let's say, a vegan bodybuilder, I'm like, oh, that's really cool, but I'm gonna, like, I don't know, I'm not gonna have it like that way, or I'm gonna eat that for, like, I'm gonna have that as a double portion, or something like that, and have it as like another meal. Things like that. It's like working around understanding what you can do in terms of meals, in terms of clothing, in terms of engagements and social engagements, and seeing how other people are coping and dealing with these situations is a lot it's very useful for an individual when they're first becoming vegan. But I think a lot of what you have to be willing to do is actually just take that first step into the darkness. You know, you have to be willing to accept that you're changing your way of life, to make that shift in yourself, because just because nobody else is doing it doesn't mean that someone ought not do it, or that someone doesn't need to be the first to pioneer this. And this is really what we're seeing in terms of all social justice movements. You have the trendsetters, you have the initial people who, you know, first, you know, make it normal and easy and accessible, and then you have people jump on and, you know, start following. But without those first few, you know, pioneers, you're not actually going to get anywhere. And I think someone has to step forward and do it. And it takes, you know, it does take courage. But I don't think it's actually all that hard. I was in the lucky situation where I can look to a community, and I'm not, you know, I'm not the first vegan in the UK. I'm not even close. This has been going on since 1945, and the Vegan Society and the movements which have brought around plant-based milks, which were accessible for me to buy. You know, there was hundreds of seitan recipes and different vegan meats and everything before I even went vegan. So like, when I became vegan, it was a piece of cake, and literally a piece of cake. I could go and get a vegan piece of cake. But I think the original, like, 1940s vegans, they had a real difficult time trying to establish themselves. But they did a hell of a job, and a lot of them made, you know, in ways which are probably ideal diets. Very plant-based, very nutritious, and ultimately, you know, not killing animals. And I think that's what it comes down to. Why are we doing this? Is it about us? No, it's about the animal. So when we're considering our identities and when we're considering the community, it should be animal focused, it should be victim focused, we should be thinking about how we're helping those who are in need.
In the same way that, oh, I just prefer wearing purple to pink. It's, oh, I don't like eating meat. Why don't you like eating meat? Because I believe that it's wrong. So you believe what I'm doing is wrong?
Yes.
No, but yes, but no.
Yes.
There is a certain binary there that when you talk about it, it can get people's back.
That's the thing, you've got to be just willing to make the confrontation, and I think the vegan community makes that a lot easier because we all have to face the same confrontation.
And I don't really know a way out of that, apart from to treat it with nuance and grace.
You don't treat it with nuance and grace. No, you say it black and white. No, you're actually wrong. You're indoctrinated. I'm very sorry. It's horrible. I know it's horrible to say, right? I was indoctrinated for 20 years of my life. My mother was indoctrinated. My grandparents were indoctrinated. All of them thought that they had to eat animal products to be healthy. We were all wrong. It's just like, yeah, man, we can all be wrong. Like, you just have to accept it. And once you realize that, oh, actually, as a collective, we can all do the wrong thing, then you've got to realize that you're taking responsibility for yourself and your society and culture. And that's just what you've got to do.
But I also think that when I think about this idea of not liking the vegan community, like eating the way that the planet was designed and the way our body is designed, is attached to some kind of culture that also necessitates dancing, certain kinds of clothing, certain kinds of ways of speaking.
Yeah, like veganism's got nothing to do with, let's say, aesthetic performances. And I do see like vegan posers, like you do get them, you know, the people who aren't really plant-based posers, you know, people who aren't really vegan, but it's about a purism. Like, I think raw vegans especially, it's about this being this, like, weird Garden of Eden, I run through fields and pick apples off trees and shit, kind of person, you know, and it's very much about a purism. But you'll find, Lena, that many vegans actually hate them. We hate that stuff. We actually care about the animals. We're doing this for non-selfish reasons. We're doing this because someone is being harmed. So you'll find that we have the same aesthetic disdain, or like even moral disdain for those individuals who are hijacking what is a social justice movement and using it as a form of identity or what should I get, a way to individualize themselves. And I think that's what you've got to remember is that, like, look, you get feminists who do this, right? Like, I'm so amazing because I'm a feminist. And they lose sight of, like, what they're actually fighting for. It's the same thing happens um, with every single movement. You've just got to realize that the movement itself is about something greater than any given individual who's a member of it.
Intersecting with various other identities, like that should be a logical thing. I guess also dictated with the fact that veganism by its nature was adopted first by the people who could afford it, because it can be incredibly expensive depending on where you live. But
Not really, Lena. Like, if I'm honest, like, veganism is absolutely cheaper. Even the language we use when we talk about meat, for example, I've said this about a million times already, but beef and boff, beef actually comes from, like, the word comes from the French boff, whilst cow comes from a Germanic origin. And the reason that is because during 1066 in the Norman invasion, the aristocrats became French because they won the war. So the peasants who were working the fields and raising the animals were poor Germanic speakers, whilst those in control of the kingdom, the aristocrats, were French speakers. And so our language reflects who was consuming the animal product versus who was buying it. When we consume the product, we call it beef. When we raise the animals, we call them cows. And that's just because the French for a cow is boff. It has nothing to do with anything other than wealth. It's been like that through human history. Animal products are very expensive. They take a lot more energy to produce. You've got to feed animals, raise them, look after them, and hope they don't die. It's a very big, risky situation often. And then you kill that animal, and then you've got to do it all over again. Whilst you could have stored, dried, and fed your family with a much more preservable resource in things like grain, which you would be feeding to the cow. I think, don't get me wrong, if you are feeding the cow purely grass and you are using the Lord's field, maybe then it makes some sort of economic sense. But chances are you're probably going to sell the animal so that you can actually make money so that you can feed your family for longer. So yeah, like, I'm not gonna lie, it's never throughout human history been luxurious to be plant-based. Plant-based diets are actually way cheaper. Think about beans, legumes, rice, lentils. All of this is cheap as chips. Cheap as chips, man. Like, we don't say cheap as steak. You don't get free steak every time you buy a salad, but you will get free salad. There are salad bars that are free. Like, plant products are by and large much cheaper than animal products. It's just an economic truth.
But I also think to myself, Lena, when you're up to your knees in floodwater and the world is on fire, are you really going to answer to yourself, why didn't you do anything? Oh, wow, I didn't really like the vegans' music.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually a really good point. I like that.
I didn't really like their expressions, the way they said things. I think we need to sometimes remove our relationship with the community of veganism, or our idea of a community around eating.
Well, no, I think that we actually desperately require the community. I genuinely do. I think community is a very important thing for any sort of movement. It tells us how we can live. We inform each other of better ways to live. We critique each other's arguments. We remove dogmatism, like individual dogmatism and bias. As long as we're focused on the goal. The problem is that we get these, like, not only hegemonies when you get these, like, cult leaders pop up. I can think of a couple. Take like the whole, like, Durian Rider community, the whole Raw to Fall thing. That was very much about aesthetics and carbs and had nothing to do with animals. And I think that, well, Free League did care about the animals also, but it has less to do with what is actually important, which is just that we're all vegan for the animals. It doesn't matter what you eat, it doesn't matter what you wear, it doesn't matter what you do in your life. It matters who you don't harm. That's all that matters. The only thing that we consider is who you aren't harming. And if you can live by a principle of not harming other individuals for your personal tastes and preferences, then you are going to be vegan. That's really what it comes down to.
It's something that is incredibly simple.
But we need a community about that. We need a community which reinforces and establishes norms and conventions which make it look appealing and acceptable to those people who don't know how to be vegan, who don't know how to live a vegan lifestyle. Like, one of the biggest things people ask is just like, where do you get your protein? Where do you get your your vitamins and stuff like that? And the vegan community is here to answer that question.
Simple.
Or answer those questions.
meal plan life and just concentrate on your relationship to the facts. It can be helpful to be part of online communities when adopting new ways of thinking or lifestyles, but I genuinely don't think it's essential. And also,
I do. I know so many people who go off the rails because they think that they're being rational, when often they're being irrational. I think having conversations with people who are, able to critique your position and your actions is essential to prevent you from being self-destructive, even, or making silly decisions. People consume too many of one vitamin and not enough for another, or it might be something less practical and more theoretical, like it's okay to consume meat once a week or twice a week, or maybe if I offset my meat consumption with something else kind of mentality. There are many justifications and reasons that we can tell ourselves that aren't true, and without other people to really criticize them, we just fall into dogmatism. We need each other. We are rationally dependent animals.
I moved to a big city. I met all kinds of people, and I met a lot of vegans who were really fucking nice and didn't make it a huge part of their identity.
No, man, look, it can be everything in their identity. It doesn't matter. There could be, it's kind of like, you just kind of said it before, it doesn't actually matter, their personalities and stuff. None of that matters. It matters, what harm is being done by you consuming animal product. It doesn't matter what the vegans wore, how nice they are, their music tastes, how friendly and, kind and considerate they are, how much opposers they are, how much of their identity was involved in veganism. None of that matters. What matters is the cow that's getting its throat slit. What matters is the chicken, which is being mutilated so that it doesn't cannibalize its other kin within the factory farm. These are the things that matter.
And just treated it like it was normal. Let me ask questions. And I realised that whether or not I critiqued the vegan conversation or the vegan community shouldn't really have a relationship to whether I could make sense or not make sense of veganism. The next one. I'm okay with eating meat because I would kill an animal with my bare hands.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say this. I had a friend who told me that he was like, if there was a lamb here, I would kill it and skin it, and I'd have no problem with that if I could get all the meat off that. One, I call BS. I don't think that he is capable of that. And I said to him, look, if you are willing to kill an animal for the sake of essentially gaining what is a luxury product, when you could have just went and bought something else and ate something else, then I don't even think I want to be friends with you. Don't get me wrong, I used to have the same stupid mentality, oh yeah, I could hunt and I could fight like these animals, and it's such a masculinity thing. But then you realise that it's actually an absolute lie. Masculinity has nothing to do with murdering children. That's appalling. Why would we even want to define the norms and conventions of what it means to be a man by how much we are willing to harm other individuals? I don't think someone's a big man because they beat a dog. I think they're a coward. And so, in the same way that if I think someone is unwilling to make a social change because of, let's say, backlash because of their friends, or because of, because they want to appear masculine and desirable to other people, then I think they're a coward as well. And I think they're less masculine in that respect. They're actually respecting the norms and conventions of masculinity to a lower degree. I see that as, if anything, what I would like to alienate from masculinity. And I think femininity should take it the same way. What is feminine shouldn't be based around the exploitation of another. When we're thinking about norms and conventions and how we engage with one another, we should be doing it in an ethical way. And aesthetics always must take a back seat to ethics. I don't care what your preferences are, your music tastes, your friends, your family, whatever it is. If there is an ethical obligation, you do that first, and then you worry about, or you don't do whatever it is that you are trying to do, which is wrong, and then you worry about the aesthetics of how that's going to impact you. You take that upon yourself. And let's be honest, if everyone accepted that veganism was the right thing to do, then it would be probably considered non-masculine to be vegan and non-feminine to be vegan, because it would be normalized. It's just because we sit on the outside of the norm that people think that it's some sort of weird soy boy, you're such a feminine, empathetic kind of person. When in reality, I think that it's the irrational response. It's like you're being overly emotive. You're so attached to your identity of being a man that you're so fragile that you won't become a vegan. Now, obviously, I don't know how much of this would be applying to you, because I'm talking from my own experience and, how I've engaged with my masculinity after being vegan. Because it's, people will even criticize you on it. But I imagine it's the same in some respects for femininity, because you're trying to feel empowered. And I think a lot of things, and I remember you saying that you felt that you had to establish, I can do this kind of like attitude, like I'm strong and capable.
That's genuinely something I used to think and say sometimes aloud. And I genuinely, the more I read about it and think about it, think that mentality comes from a pick-me girl style attitude, this obsession with the relationship between masculinity and meat. By the way, I'm going to leave loads of freaking resources downstairs because I'm not going to give you all the facts in this video or claim that I haven't been fully on the facts. I'm just going to leave the links for what I've read and listened to. But the relationship between masculinity and meat is really fascinating. And the intersection of that as a woman and like wanting to be tough enough to kill an animal, like that's a good thing. I was also thinking about this idea of like when we're trying to describe a situation in which a person has been treated horrifically and the person responsible for it deserves to be reckoned with, we often use the phrase being treated like an animal. And when we say that, we're not thinking about Fido, who's the family pet who's been around for 10 years. Being treated like an animal is synonymous in our lexicon with being treated brutally.
Or if you're objectified, you're treated like a piece of meat.
The idea that I want to be psychologically strong enough to stab something that has emotions and connections with other beings and like mourns their young and can sometimes recognize themselves in mirrors and stuff. Like the idea that I want to be cool enough to be able to kill something and then that would give me a reason to eat it is fascinating. Also, all of the stuff that I read around mental health in slaughterhouses and how actually they...
Absolute mental health in slaughterhouses is really bad. If you want to have a look at my video on it, I did a specific video talking about PTSD in slaughterhouse workers and what it's like to work in a slaughterhouse. The video is titled Working in Hell. I'm very proud of it. I genuinely consider it like probably my best video just for the fact that I'm covering something that I think most people don't care about, which is the mental well-being of slaughterhouse workers who often don't have an opportunity to perform any of that work. The economic migrants who are desperate for employment. And in the UK, we are so desperate for slaughterhouse workers because no person in Britain wants to kill animals that we are talking about enlisting prisoners into slaughterhouse work. Like as in making inmates kill animals. As if that's a good idea. As if we're going to take a bunch of delinquents, people who do not conform to the law and the legal system, and we are going to perpetuate sadistic desires in them so that we can consume animal products without considering the consequences to either the animals or the individuals or broader society. It's honestly like the rationality that we have to continue consuming animals is absolutely abysmal. We have convinced ourselves of an absolute lie.
They set up these slaughterhouses in places where there is a huge job deficit and people who are on incredibly low income are forced to take these jobs, even though it leads to a high suicide rate and a horrific mental health crisis.
Conviction rate, increased risks of domestic abuse, feelings of disintegration, insomnia, alcohol and drug addiction, you name it, they've got it, man. They've really suffered.
It's just fascinating. On top of the research,
probably wouldn't use the word fascinating as much as tragic.
That shows that serial killers often start by killing animals. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but you're just like, it's so uncomfortable that you just
Yeah, because there isn't a relationship empathetically. It's because it's sadism, right? It's the serial killer's looking for power, like domination over the other. It's like a master-slave relationship. It's the same thing with rapists and people who are willing to victimize, which is why we see higher rates of victimization coming from slaughterhouse workers. They are more likely to be sadistic to other humans after being a slaughterhouse worker. Giving reports saying that they are capable of killing other human beings. They are more likely to be violent, and domestic violence rates are very closely tied, violence rates as a whole, but domestic violence rates are very closely tied to animal agriculture or animal or slaughterhouse work. We can actually track arrest and report rates as they correlate directly with the size of a slaughterhouse facility, controlling for pretty much every other factor. Honestly, it's what it does to individuals is the equivalent of warfare.
Your body has to let out like a little like this very basic idea we have of the hunter-gatherer seems like incredibly patriarchal, incredibly outdated, and kind of skews.
Yeah, I would actually agree. I think it's the whole like I'm a Sigma male kind of attitude. Like I'm such a Sigma that I'm wandering as a lone wolf in the jungle with my spear, ready to fight any bear who comes my way. That is the feeling that I think a lot of men get when they pick up like a packet of ham in Tesco. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like one, like even if you were that guy, you don't need to be that guy. Like if you could be that guy, you wouldn't have to be. And I think there's almost this naturalism where we think that what we all desire is naturally orientated by some sort of biological imperative. And so we all think that to be more masculine, we have to, return to monkey to be like that which is desirable, which is kind of ironic, because even if it is evolutionary, what we find is that we actually, almost become attracted to the way the evolutionary system's forward looking rather than backward looking. So we're actually more attracted to something which is perhaps less like we were. If you look at like prehistoric man, like versus what we are, even physically, you'll see a big difference. More that we look more like our young than they do. We will actually look. We are actually evolving to look more like our infantile stages, and that's actually like a development in evolution. So in terms of appearances, when we're trying to like make ourselves look like something which was bygone, our ancestors, it's funny because our ancestors would have been sexually lucky by looking like their infants, which is us. So it's kind of it's just a paradox. I think it's an irony. And I think that this irony comes from a misunderstanding of evolutionary biology from the average everyday individual. Everyone thinks they understand evolution, and they think that everything can be explained through evolution. And in reality, if you look at like evolutionary biologists, they're saying things that are very different to the average everyday man. But I think man just think like, if I'm masculine, if I'm macho, if I'm like, that jungle warrior, then I will find a mate, which is only a self-fulfilling prophecy, because women think, well, what is the ideal man? And then they think, well, the ideal man would be discoverable through evolutionary reasoning. And then they reason themselves into, being into desiring like some sort of primeval, archetype, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And beauty standards have changed, have been dependent upon the psyche of the population from, generation to generation, whether it's, fair and beautiful because it's aristocratic, or whether it's, whether it's like, stupidly skinny and anorexic because of the beauty industry. Like, these standards have manipulated us from stage to stage. And I think until we start taking responsibility for ourselves, and we start saying, like, look, what we accept as beautiful and not beautiful is dependent upon morality first. Like, are we considering other individuals and how we feel when we perpetuate the standard? Is it good? And then when we do perpetuate the standard, great. Like, what is beautiful? Does it take priority of what is ethical? Absolutely not. I'm more willing to be ugly and undesirable than be immoral. And I think that we have to kind of drill that into ourselves, regardless of the way that we standardize. So, yeah, there's my little rant.
The reality that we live in. So, Pastelina, I'm going to have to veto you on that argument. Another one is that I really like me. Okay? My kingdom for a Cumberland sausage. Those are the golden years. Justifying my actions because I enjoy a thing, that there is a sensuous pleasure that I get from doing something that harms somebody else. I am not going to extrapolate all of the parallels that could potentially be applied to, but I have kind of grown into this idea that extrapolating pleasures out of things isn't as narrow as we think it is. We don't have a very small amount of places we can find pleasure in this world. There's actually...
Absolutely. What you find is that even in psychoanalytic terms, that people can enjoy things like restrictions. So you'll find that people, like, even in the restriction itself comes a sense of satisfaction. It's funny how we believe that satisfaction is produced from achieving some sort of unending desire, outward grit, when in reality, a restricted desire, a controlled and regulated desire often leads to a better and more satisfying, contentful life than, a desire of unbridled, hedonism. So, like, we do have a very weird relationship, I think, with desire in our society.
Loads of different ways that we can enjoy things and be delighted by things, which is why, like, obviously we're all randomly allocated cultures and races and countries, and wherever you are born in the world, you often have like a favourite food, a favourite friend, a favourite outdoor activity, depending on what is available to you, and those things become part of our identities, yes, but they only become favourites because they're available to us and we know that they're possible. And all
It's not just that, it's that they are made possible by the way that it regulates our desires. We actually understand ourselves in reference to our culture. So when I understand myself as a man and I look through masculinity, it's such an integral part of myself, not because it's something that it's not something that I choose to like want to associate with. It's that I simply do not know how to understand myself after being raised as a male who's been told they're a boy and they're masculine, and looking at all those individuals around them, how I would engage in social scenarios. Like, there are so many norms and conventions from which I understand my behaviours and desires in relation to, that without that structure, it seems like I'm in some sort of chaos. And I think that's part of the fear, right? A lot of the time we feel like we're out of control. Like, if we're challenging our masculinity, then we feel like we're under attack. If our masculinity is challenged or our femininity is challenged, if someone challenges our gender, we feel physically attacked. Like, we feel like we're under and we're physically attacked. But we feel like genuinely attacked, personally attacked. As if there is something that is disrupting a core aspect of how we engage with the world. But I think that what we don't realise is that unless we take responsibility for that aspect of in ourselves, then there is somebody else who is telling us how to behave. There is something in society that is controlling us and telling us what is right and wrong without our rational engagement, which means we are not free. We are slaves to some sort of cultural mandate, which we aren't willing to endorse or deny. And the only way that we can genuinely be free is if we can reject it. If we can go, actually, no, that's wrong, and this is better. We, take responsibility for it, renormalize it, and make it a part of our identity and change the world around us. And I think what you find when you do philosophy is that we are responsible for ourselves and the very world that we live in. I think someone like Heidegger can really teach you that.
Also, I had this huge revelation, which should have been more apparent to me, I guess, when I stopped eating meat. I wrote a note in my phone that literally just said, did I ever like meat, or did I just like salt? Bacon is essentially solid salt.
You're absolutely right. You can actually use bacon as a replacement for salt.
And while salt in that measure isn't probably that good for you, those things can be replicated to an incredible extent. And I also realised that the things I associated with meat were actually about the sources and the ways it was cooked.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true. Like, we fought wars over spices, man.
Meat can taste quite bland on its own. It is the meals that I associate.
They actually put meat in people's mouths. they don't actually taste. They don't actually taste the
Good.
like meat. They taste like. You can taste it a bit. I think you can get I think it's like umami, which is like a savoury taste, which is related to like savoury. You get it from like soy as well. But I don't think it's very strong. Well, if you look at something like if you put like mango, like dried mango, or like just any fruit in people's mouths, and I've got to mention actually, if you hold people's noses so they can't smell it, that's an essential part. If you hold someone's nose and you get you put meat in their mouth, then they can't usually taste it. But if you hold someone's nose and you put something like pineapple in their mouth or mango, they can tell that it's pineapple or mango. You can't tell what kind of meat it is or what kind of savoury taste it is, because you get like a savoury taste, but you're like, what is that? But if you put something like sweet in your mouth, sweet and sour are very strong or very intense flavours for us. Sour specifically for survival reasons. If you bite something sour, then it can kill you, so you spit it out. And sweet because it's essential for our brains. Glucose powers our brain. So we've evolved to be incredibly sensitive to sweet and sour tastes more than savoury. And I love savoury food, but really you can replicate savoury flavours so easily. And if you really want to know how to do that, pro tip, that same sort of like meaty taste. If you get something like shiitake mushroom powder and you add that to a dish, you can get a really strong like umami taste from that. And it's full of MSGs, like natural MSGs, which enhance the flavour. So like shiitake mushroom powder or like porcini mushrooms or something like that. Mushrooms are really good. And you know like soy has a lot of like umami kind of flavour, so like soy sauce and stuff like that. So if you're trying to replicate that kind of even that actual meaty taste, you can do that so easily.
Associate with meat that I really loved, and they can taste quite similar. But again, just because you enjoy something in the same way that we've come to see that although fast fashion was hella fun, the people who provide it to us are, to put it kindly, incredibly stish. Another one was that I would
Yeah, so essentially like just because enjoyment doesn't justify exploitation.
crave it too much. And it's actually incredible to me how much I didn't really, kind of because of the said salt reason. I feel like when you know why you're doing something and you haven't like bent into pressure or rushed yourself, you genuinely believe it, it's so much easier to move on from it in the same way that when you're in a breakup but you haven't really like resolved all of your questions or like made peace with a wish that won't come true or a future that has now been negated. So it's so much harder to stay away from that person. But because I feel like nobody pressured me, nobody rushed me, and I really came to it on my own, I had a chance to look up all the answers to the questions that I had, and boy were they easy to find, and boy were they fun.
I think we need to be reasonable though. I think that like being like, for example, if someone had confronted you with the truth of this, that's not their fault, and we should never react to obligations. Let's say like if someone came up to me, like let's say like people who are advocating against apartheid in South Africa, I imagine that those people who genuinely had a very like almost like a revulsion to the idea of like removing apartheid. But then the people who confronted them with the reality that it is wrong weren't wrong for doing so. The reactionaries who then put their hands over their ears and try to avoid the truth were being bad faith. They were trying to avoid an integral truth rather than actually confront it and be in touch with reality. And I think that we need to stay in touch with reality. And to be in touch with reality, we need to consider everyone. We aren't in touch with reality if we are just in touch with physical objects and like let's say understanding things through a materialistic lens, like a physical lens. We're really in touch with reality when we understand the experiences of individuals' lives, what individuals feel and what they, what kind of livelihood they're actually living. And I think, and I would argue that this includes animals. If we aren't considering animals in our actions, then we aren't in touch with reality. And it sounds weird and controversial, but that's part of my PhD. I'm arguing that an essential part of our understanding of reality includes the minds of others. And if we don't consider and access that information, then we are deliberately being willfully ignorant of the reality that we live in. We're trying to push pigs into some sort of like barn out of view so that we can kill them, and then what comes out is a plastic cellophane wrapped, cellophane wrapped piece of meat, which has no association with the animal that's being tortured. There's no association with the mind and the information about reality which was present but we ignored. And that is why when we are considering, our actions, we need to consider everyone. We need to be in touch with reality.
Thorough. And I also thought that it would be more awkward. And I feel like maybe the world has moved on a lot from when I was like 19, but now...
Yeah, it has. It's way more normal than me.
When I say, I don't eat meat, I'm vegetarian. No.
You're welcome, everyone. That's it. Everyone, old school vegans, thank you for making it easier for me. And, we'll bear this burden together. We can do this. We can make veganism normal.
Everybody goes like, oh, quirky. Or like, tell me more about that. Or like, why? Like, most people just haven't asked. And they're either not interested or it's a lot more normal now, at least in the world I moved through, and I'm lucky to move through. But I guess my mind was still in like 2008, but like genuinely nobody cares, to the point where I'm like, is anyone going to ask me about the incredible research I have in my back pocket? No? Okay. Also the revelation But you shouldn't have to answer any questions about your diet. You should just be allowed to have it. I feel like sometimes.
No, well, I
No,
mean, it depends,
not
right?
really.
Like, that's fine if your diet's not harming anyone else. Like, I don't care what anyone eats,
Right.
drinks, smokes, you know, that kind of thing. How they are ingesting products, so long as there's no harm being done. Like, if I find out that, you know, Coca-Cola are polluting, you know, their drinks with some sort of, like, heavy metal, I care. If, you know, I find out that there's a zoonotic disease that is ripping through Germany, like some sort of swine flu is ripping through Germany because of the food they're eating, I care. You know, if people are being fed, like, you know, contaminated food and stuff, I care because people are harmed. And, you know, then I say, like, look, actually, no, don't eat that, please, for the love of God. That harms people. It harms you. In terms of animals, it directly requires the exploitation of another. So if you are eating something, it's not a personal choice. If you are taking somebody else's personal choice away from them, and that's what you have to consider in this. It's not about you and your diet. Actually, it has nothing to do with what you eat. You can eat whatever you want. How you choose to spend your, how you choose to engage in your consumptive habits, that is your decision. But only to the point in which it impacts you and doesn't impede upon the subjectivity of another. As soon as you start killing other people, that's when things start getting iffy. People have the right to go, like, look, actually, you're doing something wrong there if you're consuming animal products. Absolutely. Because it's not about your diet, it's about the life that was taken so that you could indulge in a luxury that is causing direct exploitation, suffering, and harm, might be bringing to other individuals. It's not about you, it's about them.
Times I thought about being vegetarian and trying to maybe move towards veganism, but I was scared that I wasn't ready for all the questions, therefore I didn't change my eating habits. But that just probably shows an incredible lack of boundaries, because you should be able to pick.
You mean like getting disciplined by meat eaters? Yeah, but like, I get it, but like, that, I guess, like, as long as you understand why you're doing it, that shouldn't be a problem. Because you could just be like, I'm against animal exploitation. That's all you have to say. I'm against animal exploitation.
Pick what you eat, and you shouldn't have to have an in this essay I will TED Talk style podium speech ready just so you can order a restaurant at a meal with your friends or go home to see your parents, you know? I wish that I had known that I could change the way I ate without having to be a verbal advocate for it, just knowing that I know what I believe and what I've read. Another thing that I didn't think about was how it's not so much about morals of like clean or dirty.
Morals aren't about clean or dirty. It's not like purism. It's not like someone is dirty if they eat a vegan burger, or if they are clean if they are like some weird raw fruitarian who dances in fields, right? Like, it's not like that. Actually, we normally as vegans hate those people, as we've talked about before, as I mentioned before, because often they're the people who leave veganism, who, you know, make it look unachievable, who try to be better than other people, who, you know, forget that it's about animals and make it about themselves and their own egos, right? And we usually as vegans have a big problem with that. Like, it's a real problem when people are just these like sort of plant-based posers who are trying to, you know, gain some sort of social hierarchy. Like these kind of like weird points, and it's just like, it's not something that I think any of us like genuine vegans actually care about. Because to be vegan it's not about us in terms of an identity. It is about our identities, but in a specific sense. Our identities are structured. When we talk about personal identity, they are structured by our behaviors. How we decide to live determines who we are. And when we choose to act, when we cause harm to others, we are creating a self which is inconsiderate and harmful and malicious. And if you understand that is to be the case, then you realize that to radically change yourself to be compassionate, kind, caring, and respectful of others is the right thing to do. So when you adopt that identity, it's not that you are better than other people, it's that you are better than who you were yesterday. It's that you are trying to live a better and more respectful life. And that's what it really means to grow as an individual. So there is that identity aspect there, but it's not about being better than someone else. That's not what ethics or morality is about.
But you are.
We don't engage in the considerations of our behaviors and whether they are right and wrong so that we can supersede one another, but rather raise the standards of behaviour so that we can all become better individuals together.
Am I vegetarian? Am I not? I cut down on meat a long time before I actually officially quit it. And one of the revelations for me was when I was reading about it. One of my friends was vegan, and she was like, "Oh, every now and then I just want to eat one fucking burger, just one fucking burger." And I was like, "Well, mate, it's not about identity; it's about impact. So if there's one day a year where you want to eat a burger, give me a call, let me know, and I, a meat eater, won't eat any meat that day, and the planet wouldn't have been impacted the same."
Okay, so one, it's not about the planet, it's about individuals who are being slaughtered and exploited. Two, from a consequentialist standpoint, you could also just avoid eating meat and your friend also not eat meat, and it's even better. And as well, it's not a point-based system. Someone doing a good action does not justify us doing a harmful action. Let's say I don't know, let's say there was a local child abuser and they made the same point. I'm not going to abuse my kids today, so you can abuse your kids today. Does that make sense? No, of course it doesn't make sense. Even though you might say, oh, well, wait a minute, the harm done is equal. The amount of harm done isn't the only metric we judge our behaviours on. We consider our behaviour against what could have been. We could have negated harm to all children. This is wrong and irresponsible as a whole. We should remove this from our society in general. These are the kind of things that we need to consider consequentially. In terms of intention, are we being rational? Are we justified in taking these behaviours? And when you say it's not about identity, but it actually is. Because our identities aren't just these aesthetics where we socially engage with each other. It's not just about this sort of engagement where you see me and I see you and we understand each other and we engage in some sort of aesthetic, rapture or something, right? Where everyone feels super recognized and important and unique and special and all of this sort of stuff. Our identities have a purpose. Our identities are what give us our purpose. It's how we actually manifest our purpose in our lives. We give reasons to a series of actions which are then create a character, an identity from which we can act through so that we are intelligible to others, so that we are understood in a normative framework, so that we can perpetuate norms and conventions and standards, so that we can engage in a way which is rational and makes sense. That's what our identities are for. It is true that it gets pulled in with aesthetics, but it's not really all about aesthetics. The primary purpose of identity is ethical. It's about our relationships with others. And to dismiss that, your identity for, let's say, an act-based system, doesn't realize that our actions are downstream from our reasons and our understandings, which constitute our engagement with reality, which constitute our identities.
And it didn't come to this, but I think it would have been cool that if I was, earlier in my 20s and I was hesitant about giving up animal products, being able to buddy with somebody and being okay, between the two of us, we're going to eat one vegan diet. Because that's better than both of us carrying on the way that we are.
This is it. It might, look, even if you said it's both better than, it's better again if you just went vegan. If you're why are you okay, we're going to go vegan together. Why is that not the series of actions? You're going for a half measure because it seems to alleviate your conscience, but does not necessarily respect the rationality about why you ought to be vegan. If you understand the animal abuse behind it, if you understand that an individual is being killed for your preferences, then every time you consume any animal product should be seen as a mistake, as if you've made a terrible, terrible mistake. You could have done not only better, but you have disrespected someone. You've actually, degraded someone's life to a meal. And that's what it's about.
And if we don't feel like it's possible to give up completely, why can't people tag team? Explain that to me. Another thing I didn't predict about giving up meat was how much calmer it made me feel. And I've talked before about how massive policy change, big systemic shifts are needed, but taking on individual...
But I think that to get massive policy change, we need social movement. The law is the last thing to change, and it changes after the body of the public have changed their position to the point in which it becomes legally ratified. We all understand that the norms and conventions of our society are what the law is then based off. When we realise, actually, wait a minute, this is so wrong, we're against this, and then it becomes ratified in law. So you don't look for the law to guide you. I mean, you do, like, respect the law, follow the law, absolutely. But don't look for the law to guide you. Take responsibility for the law itself. What is lawfulness, and what does it respect, if not the will of the people?
Changes and inconveniences can, one, change the conversation and the consumer demand with those of us able to do it, but also just internally align ourselves a little bit more. Like, again, I just felt like every time I ate meat, I was gaslighting myself because I knew what the truth was and I knew what was actually going on in the world. But every time I sat down for a meal, I was like, switch it off. You imagine that.
Yeah, absolutely. Gaslighting yourself is the right word. As soon as you start avoiding the truth, it's a perverse mindset. You're doing something which is you're trying to essentially change the world around you to fit your desires, and that is a grade A ticket. Like, it is a first class ticket of something real bad in terms of mental health. When you start realizing that your identity, your understanding of the world is all a lie, and then you fall into existential crisis, and it's horrible. So definitely don't do that.
Nah, you didn't.
I'm speaking from experience. I think we all have done it, and I think we all do it. But I think we should avoid being detached and removed from reality for our own sake, even not considering, its overall impact upon everyone else around us.
To that, no, that's not for you. And so living more in line with reality makes me feel better. In the same way that when you break up with a person who you know is never going to be right for you, even though they give you the tinglies, still feels better even though you're devastated because you know you're living in closer alignment with reality. And just for some reason it made me feel calm. I can't explain it. So Lena, if you're so passionate about this thing, why aren't you a vegan? As we know,
Yeah, why do you mean?
veganism is an incredibly nuanced topic that
It's not that nuanced.
nobody, vegans or non-vegans,
Believe me, I'm writing my PhD on it, and I don't even think it's that nuanced. I think it's really straightforward. I don't know why. I don't even know why people are on even vegan yet. Like, I've hit the point now where I'm like, I don't like. Maybe it's just because I've done it for so long. I just don't understand the reasoning. It just seems absolutely absurd.
Yeah. It's
It just
can cover in a 40 to 50 second window in a conversation. And one of the nuances is that not everybody can do it.
this video is 17 minutes.
But people have health
You have all the time in the world to tell me why you want vegan.
things. A small amount of people, but people do. People have body issue things around meals. And
Yeah, but look at it like this. I know that body issue and body positivity can be difficult to incorporate into what is seen as a more quote-unquote restrictive lifestyle. But one, I think we have to understand that the rules aren't restrictions. Rules can be freedom. Think about how we engage with, let's take our roads and our system of transport. Imagine if we didn't have rules and regulations. Imagine how chaotic and just essentially frustrating it would be. And if you can't imagine, Google Thailand and Vietnam. I don't know how they even. I think there is actually some rules that they kind of know colloquially. Although as a foreigner, you have no idea what's going on, and it's chaos. There's a moped on the path, and you're like, wow, what's going on? So it's confusing, and being in that environment gives you an insight into why rules can be such an important and integral aspect of our lives, because they offer us a way to make sense of the world, to engage with one another in a way that actually frees us from absurdity and fiction, where we can see, actually, this is what I need to do if I want to achieve this, or what is right is this and not that, because I'm actually in touch with reality. I know what is right and wrong. I know what is true and false. Rules are essential for our understandings of the world and our understandings of ourselves. So restrictions, even in terms of our meals, aren't necessarily a bad thing. Don't look to them as if they are like bad and horrible and evil. Look to them as a method of freeing yourself from something that would be irrational even. So often, like I'm coming from an eating disorder background where I have starved myself in the past because of some because of like essentially a need for control and things like that, right? I've essentially engaged in such a way as to try and make myself into someone, and I'm holding myself to certain standards, and it's not healthy, it's not good. And let's say something triggered me, and I fell into that behavior. The trigger isn't the problem. Whatever I've experienced in terms of the eating disorder that has made me not want to eat, which has gave me, let's say, like a nervous loss of appetite, hasn't actually gave me the nervous loss of appetite. The nervous loss of appetite, the anxiety around food, is actually psychological. It's within my psyche. It's within me. I've understood the world in such a way that this event is triggering. Nothing outside of me has made it triggering. My relationship to it is the trigger. So you can't even look towards easing, let's say, your triggers, because if you try and ease your trigger is going to manifest as something else. It's like a phobia. You aren't scared of spiders. You actually aren't. It's not the spiders that you are most likely scared of. It is a dormant fear within you that is manifesting as, oh my God, it's a spider. And that's your way of processing, of objectifying, making real this experience of fear. It is exactly the same with body, I think with body issues a lot of the time, and with like, eating disorders. And I'm talking from personal experience as well. We often have no relationship to the trigger. There is no justification for being triggered about something. It's totally irrational, and we know it's irrational, but it's manifesting because of our relationship with the world, and moreover, our relationship with ourselves and other individuals. It's like societal expectations and stuff. So don't look to minimize your triggers. Look to bolster your ego so that things that would trigger you no longer trigger you. That's a temporary stopgap. And then look to treat the problem, the psychological issue which is causing you to be triggered by what is a positive event. And then even if we consider all of this, if I'm honest, it still doesn't bring, there's no end which justifies using another as a means to an end. Like, just because you're valuable and just because you have a psychological issue would not justify your taking advantage of someone else. I could understand someone who, let's take someone, like in a very severe case, let's say someone was severely mentally ill and they committed a crime. We might say that they were acting in a way which was, irrational, that they didn't have control of themselves entirely, that they weren't in grip, weren't in touch with reality even. But it wouldn't justify their actions. We could say that, like, okay, I understand why you've done it, but that doesn't make it a good thing. You've done the wrong thing, which is why we would then want to treat that individual and make them better. It might be something like, when like psychotic people become impulsive and they risk themselves. We can understand that the risky behavior is actually a negative, and so it's irrational, and we seek to help that person because of this risky behavior. And it can, and risking others is part of that. If there is some psychological issue, or like issue in your psyche, which is causing you to risk or harm or take advantage of other people or be inconsiderate to others, the problem is you, and you need to seek therapy. You need help to overcome that issue, rather than indulge in the unethical behavior. It's only going to make you worse, and it's only going to lead to other people being harmed.
And hard and fast rules and control. People also have access issues and financial issues, and it's only ever you, I think, who's going to be able to honestly say, could I be vegan?
Well, look, I think like access issues are really overblown. Like, if you live in a food desert, you probably can eat vegan junk food. I lived in a food desert at one point. Like, I was a good distance away from anything. The only thing around us was a garage and a Subway, and I was having salad sandwiches, and I could get some food from the garage, but not much. If you live in a food desert, you can usually have any junk food in general, stuff that's unhealthy. Eat the vegan junk food if you can. you know, and do your best to, you know, change your diet as much as you can. Let's say you absolutely have no access, then that's vegan anyway, because it's possible and practicable. It's already in the definition that if someone was unable to do it, let's say they're on a desert island, then they are still vegan. Like their intention is to not harm animals, to not be cruel, but they have no possibility of actually you know, being a vegan. It's the same thing with being in a food desert, or if you're dirt poor and the only thing available is, you know, help from strangers, and people are, you know, giving you non-vegan food. You can be a homeless vegan who eats meat sausage rolls. We don't alienate people who are, you know, controlled by their circumstances, because we recognise that it isn't them who's committing the action, that they have no alternative. It's about rational justifications for our own actions. Can you justify consuming meat, dairy and eggs knowing that you are able to choose otherwise? and in that sense, that's the question that we have to all ask ourselves when we are talking about going vegan. It's not just about whether it's possible, it's not just whether it's about, you know, like this idea where I've got to have a conversation like, do I feel like it's possible? We have to look at the objectivity of it. Can I do it? Am I able to do it? Is it reasonable to ask this of myself? And almost every single individual in the world can answer yes. A vegan diet is a reasonable diet. It's the way I should live my life. A vegan lifestyle is I don't have to buy leather. I don't have to, you know, harm animals. And I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. And also, like, look, man, I don't mean to sound bad, but I thought while finding out why you weren't going vegan, like, because someone can't access vegan food, well, that has nothing to do with you.
My life intersects with those things. I'm definitely coming towards a point where I think that in the future I could be, but I'm also trying to not scare off the moody teenager in myself who's going to throw their like, toys out of the pram.
But like, you're in control of yourself. Like, don't try to reason with yourself. You are the boss, right? Like, there is no one else who tells you what to do but you. You are responsible for every single one of your actions. There isn't anything in which you think, do or say that you are not responsible for. So, I'm sorry. You're condemned to be free. Don't try to, you know, like work with yourself in a way which is, don't get me wrong, try to care for yourself, be amenable to yourself, but if you set down a rule for yourself, then you can follow that rule. It's your actions, it's your responsibility, it's your choice at the end of the day.
And be like, no, this is too expensive, this is too much hassle, this is ruining my relationship with food and the body that I've been trying to heal for decades.
But then you can make it so it's not like that. Like, if you know that you're going to tell these justifications to yourself, then you go like, no, I'm being stupid. Like, it has, like, there is, like, I'm going to go and get some, like vegan food that I really enjoy. Or I'm going to go and, if I'm not enjoying this, then maybe I need to change the way I'm engaging with my food. And look at it like, don't look at veganism as if it's some sort of, like, horrible restriction, but look at it as a freedom, as an opportunity to live a life which is, you know, in touch with reality, which is compassionate and caring, and considers the consequences of your actions. Look at it as an opportunity to be free from unjustified behaviours which are controlling you. And I think that cannot be manifest more with having to have this internal struggle. If you're having an internal struggle, then it's time for you to put your foot down. You tell yourself what you're doing. You don't, you know, reason with yourself, oh, please, self, I want to do it, and then just cave into whatever whatever behavior it is, because it ultimately will end up controlling you. Now, don't get me wrong, we all fail, right? I expect that, you know, there'll be hardships and, you know, issues in my life whenever I behave in certain ways, and I know that I've got to do, you know, take my own advice, and it's not 100% easy. But don't try to, you know, work around what your preferences are. Make sure that your preferences reflect what is rational. Like, you know, if you really wanted to put a fork in a plug socket, you don't listen to that urge, man. You just do. You just don't do it, okay?
I'm not doing it anymore. So instead of throwing myself in at the deep end with veganism, especially because I started the pandemic real bad at cooking, I'm moving slowly towards not automatically buying eggs and having them in the house all the time. I only drink plant-based milks most of the time.
If you do like eggs and you use eggs a lot, buy vegan egg replacers. Or you could even just, like, you could buy something like Kraft, which is like 8 eggs in a bottle, and I think it's like £3. It's a bit expensive that's if you want to go like bougie. You could just use tofu even, like, you know, if you want like scrambled eggs, whatever you're doing with them, look towards the vegan options. Look how to veganize those meals you enjoy and that you've learned to love and engage with on a day-to-day basis, and that'll make your life so much easier. Like, don't actively try to harm yourself, but make sure that you engage with yourself. You are the boss, but then, you know, try to be rational and considerate of your own desires and your own system of drives, as well as everyone else's.
When I'm out and I'm grabbing a sandwich, the rule in my head is if there is a vegan sandwich available, I have to buy it. And when we go out for food, unless it's pizza, because the vegan pizzas, oh my god. So
vegan pizzas are great, man. I don't know which vegan pizzas you've had necessarily, Lena, that you think are really shit. But like, there are some amazing vegan pizzas now. Like, there's a place around mine called Visa Guys, which is incredible. I've probably mentioned it like 1,000,000 times to my followers. I can get like cheesy chips and garlic sauce. I can get like, you know, Texas, you know, was it like Texas barbecue chicken pizzas and stuff. You know, ZZ's have vegan pizzas which are quite nice. You've got what is it? Like, there's like Domino's, I think, have vegan pizzas now. Papa John's have a vegan pizza which is really nice. There's loads of vegan pizzas, man, that I think are enjoyable. But even if they weren't, like, I'm sorry, but like, don't eat pizza then. Like, you don't enjoy it. Like, you don't enjoy the vegan. Like, you should be looking at the non-vegan option as if it's not an option anymore. It's not that you choose the vegan option. It's that the non-vegan options are not options. They aren't alternatives. They are not there. You cannot buy them without being unethical. That is how you should be looking at it.
somebody needs to be written up for that shit. That is a crime against humanity. Anyway, if I'm out and there is a vegan option on the menu, I need to pick it, or at least seriously consider it.
Seriously considering it would be thinking about the screams that you would hear if you heard the way these products were produced. That would be seriously considering it. Or, thinking about the cow getting its throat slit, or a baby cow being beaten to death with a pipe, which happens all the time. 25% of dairy cows are pregnant when they go to slaughter. So that would be seriously considering the product that you're about to buy. Not taste. Taste isn't a serious consideration.
I guess my concept is learn meals, not rules, and moving it.
Learn rules. Rules will save you from yourself. Rules will free you. Rules will make life easy and simple. Having to make loads of mental gymnastics and make little little ways of living, just one step at a time, because you're struggling to deal with day-to-day engagements, can be nullified if you have a rule which sets forth behavioral limits, so that you no longer look towards, oh, but I really want the chicken tacos, but and start thinking about it and desiring it. If you didn't think of it as an option, you just stop desiring it. You find that you will not want it anymore. You won't even look to it as if it's food. You'll see a corpse. And that radical shift in how you look at the world is what will make you stay vegan. It is what will make you understand veganism. It's about the animals.
Every meal towards being less animal focused is the plan. When I learn a new meal that I can cook at home, which...
Actually, I want you to make every meal more animal focused. Think about animals, actual animals. Don't think about meat. Don't think about cheese, dairy, and eggs. Think about the suffering, death, and persecution that other individuals are facing. That's what I want you to think about when you look at non-vegan options. Well, options. Look at it like this. This is Socrates, is the fool free when he gets what he wants? Freedom is not in obtaining some sort of hedonistic desire. Freedom is being rational and choosing what is actually right. So choose the right decision. Choose what is justified, what is moral, what is ethical.
Goddamn takes me a long time. I am not a natural chef. I usually try and make it a vegan dish, so that I can, instead of being like, oh, I now have to eat vegan, and then I get to dinner time and I'm really hungry and I just need to make something and I have no idea how to make vegan food. I'm more trying to make my automatic, I'm exhausted, I just need to make something, meals, vegan in my head. And I'm learning...
Yeah, veganize what you eat.
That there's loads of conversations happening outside of the strict, I am a clean vegan, you are a dirty meat eater stuff.
There's a cookbook called Dirty Vegan. And it's all about vegan junk food. Vegan junk food is I'm not gonna lie, I'm such a junk food. I think I started the stream drinking Monster. Like I'm such a junk food vegan that it's unbelievable. Like I could probably list like half the vegan junk food that exists. I tried the the vegan Milky Way now, which is delicious, by the way. Honestly, like I've tried so much vegan junk food. I live most of my vegan life on vegan junk food. It has nothing to do with being like some sort of pure fruit eating, dancing in the woods kind of like I don't know, like I don't know, like kind of Garden of Eden flowy aesthetic. You know, it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with animals. That's all it has to do. Like, do you kill people to like? Do you want to kill others in order to survive, or do you want to not kill others in order to survive? Do you want to exploit others, or do you want to consider them in your behaviors? And I think that we all think genuinely, if we search deep down, that we should consider others. And I think that we realise that veganism is right for that reason.
Style debate where it's really about impact research around how if everybody just gave up meat and animal-based products for breakfast and still had lunch and dinner the same, how much of an impact that would make.
Or they could just go vegan as a whole, and all of them meals would be vegan, and you'd find that it would become normal, easier, more accessible, cheaper. Everything would be better because we would stop being accommodated for by our regular food manufacturers and so on. The reality is, it's not about, like, look, being vegan is actually really easy, man, and I think you just need to commit to it. I think you just need to make that commitment in your head and just tell yourself, I'm going to do this. Like, Lena, I'm willing to make this decision for myself and take control and responsibility for my actions, and I won't be, basically peer pressured by tradition or controlled by societal expectations or my own desires and preferences. I will do the right thing. I will desire which is right, and I will engage in a way which makes sense, and you'll find that you'll be happier, like freer, like genuinely living a more purposeful life.
When you give people affordable vegetarian and vegan options, how much more likely they are to buy them. And also how
But they're not even that expensive, right? Like, you can get like a pack of vegan mints from Tesco for £1.79, 75, I think it is, and that'll do you 4 meals. Like 4 meals for it's way cheaper than like non-vegan mints anyway. Like, think about how much non-vegan mints is per 100 grams. It's actually really quite expensive. Animal products are usually quite expensive. Vegan products can be expensive and bougie when they're like fancy like alternatives, but you don't have to eat those. You can eat something else. And we're not even talking about accidental vegan food. If you like Doritos, for example, they're like £1. If you like, like Bourneville fingers are the same price as, the dairy, like dairy milk fingers. Like, they're exactly the same, like in terms of price. But you can go for the Bourneville ones and nothing dies. So when you talk about what options you have and the expenses that are like, how expensive it is to live a vegan diet, I've lived as a vegan under the poverty line for many years in the UK. I know many vegans who have. I know many vegans who've lived in worse scenarios, and historically and socio-politically, veganism is, or plant-based diets, or vast, very high in plant diets, we'll say, plant abundant diets, are exclusive, are done by the poor for the very reason that it's cheaper. People globally around the world can't afford meat, like when they're under the poverty line. They usually eat things that are much cheaper and more accessible. The only reason that things like milk are cheaper and in any ways is because of subsidization. But then that subsidization ends up crushing markets abroad, and then you're persecuting the poor over there. So we need to think about how we are actually engaging with our food system. We need to think about how we're engaging with our meals. And rather than trying to say that veganism is expensive, look into the options that are available to you. Look to how you can live a vegan diet. Do the research around it before you jump to conclusions that veganism is really expensive or inaccessible. Because chances are, Lena, it's very accessible and relatively, cheap to be vegan wherever you are right now.
That my idea of free range was as well, because I'm also like, okay, but it reminds me of Never Let Me Go, where they keep these children in a really nice private school and they seem to have like pretty okay lives, but at the end of their life, spoiler.
Yeah, Never Let Me Go is like a vegan film and book and that.
They fucking kill them. I don't think anybody finished watching that film or reading that book and thought, well, at least they could run around in their nice private school garden before they were brutally sacrificed.
Yeah, exactly. Like, would it be justified if they lived a better life or a good life at all? Like, why do we try to justify committing harm and exploitation through, providing what is basic amenities and basic rights to others? Giving people a big garden doesn't justify slitting that throat, whether it's a human or an animal.
Just think that past me, and probably a little bit present me, has a really fucked up relationship with the difference between need and want. And I realised that I really wanted to eat meat, but actually, specifically me, an individual, did not need to eat meat.
No individual needs to eat meat. There is no biological imperative to eat meat. We can all be, essentially herbivores. There is absolutely no reason to eat meat as a human. We can live happy, healthy vegan lives. And also, we all have issues with want and need, and we are an indulgent society. Like, we do indulge in pleasure a lot, but we can find other pleasures and other outlets. As he said before, the way that we can desire is multifaceted. There's so many different ways to express our drives, looking towards the consumption of 5 different animal products, and chances are you probably eat 2 or 3 of them, as a means of expressing our drives, is probably more restrictive than opening up your worldview to engaging with the over 200,000 plants that are edible, or expressing your desires in a different, even non-consumptive format, or even food consumptive format. Go and find entertainment, rather than trying to seek pleasure in, let's say, a consumable object. Seek it in an experience, in a connection with another individual. These are the kind of things that I think we need to engage with, which will be more healthy for society as a whole. Never mind, let's say, our relationship with our food. But I completely agree. Even if you do want to consume bad things, consume bad things, man. That's your choice. You do it. I'm not gonna judge you. I drink. I drink. I don't take care of myself. I certainly need to go to the gym and do more to look after my health. So I'm not gonna sit on this pedestal and be like, well, you're not healthy enough. That's your decision, right? Your health is your responsibility and your decision. But none of this justifies the killing and consumption of another.
Was a huge revelation, but these are just my feelings on the topic. Be honest and caring to each other in the comments below when you share your own thoughts and experiences. I'm going to leave loads of resources of things that I have been using to learn about all this, but I am here to be the visual record of somebody who is not perfect and is still working it the hell out. But thank you so much for watching.
Well, I genuinely believe in the gumption. Oh, there we go. Mike the Vegan says that's the #1 thing that a vegan needs is gumption as well. So, yeah, maybe that'll tell you that if you want to be part of the gumption club, then you probably need to be part of the vegan one as well. But, I think, Lena, you've got a genuine, I think you genuinely care. I don't think you understand necessarily veganism as a whole yet, but I think you're on the right path, and I think that it's probably the right way to, you know that it's the right way to go. So, yeah. Beans and chickpeas are 50 pence, absolutely.